All right, hello everyone. We are going to pick up on slide 16 and start talking about technology and the internet and how it has affected um, our minds today. So, very much relevant to current circumstances. So, when we look at slide 17, this is just kind of a quick comparison of how far we have advanced in, about a century, both out in the physical world, but how much technology has also influenced that physical world. Um, so this is just an example using Times Square, which is covered in um, billboards that are completely digital now. So technology has shaped the human mind into what we consider a new form, very similar to how writing did. Um, so if you recall the kind of infographic from the social intelligence lecture showing how rapidly information technologies integrate themselves into our lives after being introduced. So that was, showing the introduction of like the refrigerator and the washing machine and microwaves and how long it took for most people to start using them and how that time frame got shorter and shorter and shorter. Um, on the scale of decades rather than centuries, and then eventually, a new technology comes out and we all start using it within months. Um, this was similar to the case of writing. First, it was for just the elite. Usually, writing was for extremely wealthy, educated people, often by just clergy. And it didn't really take off until the development of mass scale printing. So, until the printing press was invented in Germany, and then books could be printed in mass scale, and until people had enough disposable income to buy more books, and until education was widespread enough to teach most people to read. Because we know even 200 years ago, in this location in Missouri, only about 10 to 15% of the population was illiterate. So, it takes a little while, but once it starts really building up, it's like a tidal wave. So on slide 18, just another kind of example of how technology has progressed from the tiny little one TV that would be in a household if you were lucky in the living room to, whole in home theater systems that not everybody has for sure. But a lot of homes today do have multiple TVs and have large screen TVs, much larger than what maybe our parents or grandparents grew up with. Um, so, for instance, for televisions, they were introduced into the households during the 1960s. Um, and it was a novelty. They were in black and white. It wasn't until usually the late 70s to early 80s that people got color televisions. And by 30 years later, in around 1990, more than 90% of households had a television. And then, you think more generally, 10 years after that, in 2000, people spent an average of 4.5 hours in front of screens. This is likely increased, though, because at that time it was just really mostly television screens. But today that that is not the only type of screen that we are using. Right now, I am actively using a computer screen. There is the screen of the phone that I'm using to record this that's reflecting into a like framed painting so I can see my reflection. So I'm using multiple screens here that aren't even television. Um, So an exercise that you guys can do, especially since a lot of you are now back at home, is you can ask your parents or grandparents when they got their first color TV. I know that my mother definitely has a story for this. And, it's very vivid for her when their family first got the color TV. So see if you can ask your family when they got that. So moving on to slide 19, the internet and why certain things, especially moving things, are so compelling. I'm sure a lot of you have used GIF or GIF images to pull attention to things, whether as reaction images when you're replying or texting to people, or sending short little videos on Snapchat, Instagram, etc. And the question is, why are moving images, short videos, so compelling? And the thought is that continuous motion triggers us to orient our attention more so than a static picture. This is almost, if you think about the jokes about a T-Rex can only sense something or see something if there's movement. Well, our brains are almost like that. Movement directs attention immediately. And so this is a perceptual feature that our brains have. And so the brief length of events in visual media combined with special effects heighten the perceptual allure. So it helps to enhance focus on the external world. So basically, we have kind of a perfect storm of features that appeal to the human perceptual system when we are using moving images online or in television, and especially in advertising. I'm sure that you have seen so many advertisements when you were scrolling through your phone, and they catch your eye, whether you like it or not. And sometimes, if you're like me, you'll quickly scroll past it because it's obnoxious. It is distracting you from what you're trying to read, and that's by design. There are many psychologists who work with different companies to help them improve their advertising to catch your attention. And one of the things they do is use movement, use moving images, flashing lights to try to capture your attention. They know it works. Next time that you're scrolling through Facebook or Instagram or anything else like that, and you see one of those advertisements, there's a psychologist behind that. And if you're interested, maybe one day you can be that psychologist. All right, on slide 20, we've mentioned before that technology, writing, everything else brings together human cognition into an external place. I have the picture of Wikipedia on here, which is such a perfect example of everyone's collective human cognition coming together so that other people can learn from it. It's that external memory storage. And so the internet is fairly hypnotic to people. It links human beings together, whether that is socially or via distracting our attention with movement and images and entertainment and text that is stored in those external memory systems. There's associative links of the internet that really mirrors the associative structure of our own semantic memory. So, for instance, within our own brains, semantic information is kind of connected together. So, similar items in semantic memory are connected close together, whether it is when we think about neurons firing in close proximity. That's why when I had you guys play that game in class where you went through and named animals, and you were naming animals that were similar to one another based off what the other person said, we were creating that kind of neural web. Well, the internet is fairly similar. It's often connected based off of similarity. Wikipedia is a great example of this, where it's connected webs. You can click on one thing from an article, and then that can lead you to clicking on another associated item, and then to another associated item from that article. And of course, you always end up in something that is a total rabbit hole that you never intended to get to. But it follows actually a logical pattern that's very similar to our own neural structure. So facts and concepts are very linked together in a web of associations, and it allows us to jump from one idea to an entirely remote idea in just a few steps. So anyone who's ever lost themselves in Wikipedia articles for a few hours, you've gone through this before. So we are going to end this video here, but when we pick up, we'll pick up on slide 21 and start to talk about the social side of the internet, which I've put a discussion question in your discussion board. I'll address it in the next video. You may have already seen it if you've gone into the discussion board, but start to think about your use of the internet in social terms for the next video here, and what that has been like for you in the past, how it has developed over time, and what it's like right now in this little moment of history. So we are going to discuss that in the next video. I'll see you then.